much about my history because I did not know that this was a real thing. But we'll talk about that. Anyway, I'm just apologizing for it being so short, and I will just get right into it. This is a case that I actually came across a list of the #1 cold case in each state, which we might make a series. But I'm going kind of out of order. This is actually the case from Baltimore, Maryland. And I am so excited to share it with you, and then we'll talk about why I'm excited about it in the end. Because as you all know, I'm a giant geek. As portrayed by the name of this channel and all you little geeklings that are hanging out with me. So, wrong one. Here we go. Back in 1954, Carolyn Wasilewski was a blonde, beautiful girl and a total rocker chick. She was a member of the Drapes gang, and she loved nothing more than hanging out with rockabilly bad boys, wearing scandalous fashions, and generally outraging the citizens of Baltimore, Maryland. I will talk about this more, but I did not know that the Drapes were a real thing. I honestly thought they were just from the movie Crybaby. I did not know they were a real thing, so I should really brush up on my history. Carolyn Loretta Wasilewski, I'm sure I'm murdering that, you guys know how good I am with names, was born on June 12th of 1940 in Baltimore. She was the eldest of 7 children, and by the time she was 14, she had quite the reputation, and she was known to run around with an edgy gang called the Drapes. In those days, they were known as juvenile delinquents. Teen gangs like the Drapes were known to commit petty crimes such as stealing cars or holding hot rod races like the one seen in Grease or the one seen in Crybaby. I've not watched that in so long, I really should. Did you know there's 2 versions of it? So weird. So this was not the kind of thing that a respectable teenage girl should have been involved in, especially at 14. But Carolyn was feisty. She knew her own mind, and she was looking for excitement. Who cared about what anyone thought? Everyone who didn't think the same way she did were all just squares. At 6:15 p.m. on November 8th, 1954, Carolyn told her family that she was going to meet a friend, 16-year-old Peggy Lamana, Lamana, to register for a series of dance lessons at the nearby elementary school. Strange. In her tight pink top, black skirt with pink and blue arrows, and a black denim jacket, Carolyn looked a little dressy for a Monday night trip to school, but her bleach blonde hair was in curlers and covered with a bright green scarf. There was a chic black scarf tied jauntily around her neck, so why did she leave the house with curlers in her hair? Back in those days, getting your hair set suggested that a night out was on the card. So where on earth did she go? Well, she definitely didn't go to Peggy's house, that's for sure. She failed to turn up at Peggy's trailer park home on nearby Washington Boulevard, and she did not show up at the school to register for dance lessons either. After leaving her home on Mardell Avenue, she simply vanished. When Carolyn did not return home that evening, her parents were pretty worried. Yes, she ran with the fast crowd, but it wasn't like her to stay out so late on a school night. So they were worried, of course, and they scoured the streets looking for her, but could not find her anywhere. express train bound from Harrisburg to Baltimore spotted something really odd on the train tracks near Belvedere Bridge. Something that looked suspiciously like a body. Tragically, it was the partially nude body of Carolyn. Her shoes and skirt were missing, and written on her right thigh in lipstick was a name: Paul. The murder, of course, became massive news locally, and in fact, journalist Bill Stump was actually a passenger on the train that had to stop after the body was spotted on the tracks. The train just slowed down and no one knew what was going on. He told anniversary of her death each year, interest is sparked once again. It's highly unlikely that we'll ever know who the mysterious Paul was, or who took this rebellious little girl, because she was 14, she was a little girl, who took her life so violently, but clearly her legend lived on longer than the mere 14 years that she was alive. Every article that I found about this case showed her picture, and they were like, she doesn't look 14. Does she look 14? She doesn't look 14. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how old she was, whether she looked 30 or she looked 14, or it doesn't matter how old she died. Her life was snuffed out at 14, and it has gone on for decades, and no one has ever been found or punished or whatever. Now, I decided to report on this case because I had no idea that squares and drapes were really a thing. I always said that I was definitely a scrape because I was kind of a mix between the two. I definitely, right around the age of 14, had I've talked about this before, my bad girl phase, but I don't know how life was back then. My parents would not have let me run around like that. My mom would have yanked me back in the house. Yes, I wore dark makeup and I listened to music that people deemed inappropriate, but I don't know. I don't think it matters. It doesn't matter if she was 14 or 20. She was still brutally attacked and then thrown off a bridge half naked with someone's name, and I feel like I couldn't find any sort of, did she know somebody named Paul? Did she have a friend named Paul? I couldn't find any information to make this video more detailed, and I know that it happened a long time ago, but it just amazes me how some of these cases are just gone. I really wish that this case could be solved to give her family some closure. Many years later. I love the movie Cry Baby. Like I said, I love Johnny Depp. But I didn't know that was a real thing. Did you know? Have you seen Cry Baby, first of all? Did you like it? Did you think it was corny? You guys all know I love musicals. I didn't know there were 2 versions of it until, oh Lord, was it MTV or VH? It had to be VH1. Played it, and there's like all these extra songs and things that are not in the DVD version. I've never been able to find deleted scenes. I know it's not in relation to this case at all, but the correlation to the case to this movie is why I did this case. I don't know. Anyway, I'm sorry that this video is not longer, but I did feel like Carolyn's case needed to be told. I can't imagine. I would love to go back and see what life was like back then. I was definitely born in the wrong era. I love Elvis. I love Marilyn Monroe. I was born many years too late. The 1920s. I'm so in for that, which is totally different. But seriously, I was born way too late. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. I don't really have much more to say about this case, unfortunately. What's going on here? Mom's doing well, still kind of confused sometimes. She has good days and bad days. We really never got any sort of explanation as to why sometimes she thinks it's 1997. She is really fighting to get her because she hasn't really done a whole lot of it. But heaven forbid she take that walker because it makes her look old. So, and she doesn't charge her cell phone or halfway know how to work it. So even if she got to Iowa or somewhere, she couldn't call me because her phone would not work. But I think we're gonna have to come up with something, because otherwise, and my sister can confirm or deny in the comments, she and my sister might kill each other. And as many cases as I have done, I am not hiding any bodies, even though I probably could. Just kidding. But I could see, my mom's little, but she's feisty. I wouldn't mess with her, that's for sure. Sean is working part-time now. He just found he starts tonight, actually, a temporary position. So he's sleeping